everyone, and thank you so much for coming out. We are all here today because you've been part of a larger project. We've stood up and fought for justice and equality in our community. And at some point, that brought us into contact with Shama Sawant in her Socialist City Council office, whether it was the fight for a $15 an hour minimum wage, the fight for Indigenous Peoples Day, the fight against the CAA/NRC in India, or the fight to tax Amazon. Or maybe you live outside of Seattle like myself, but the ripple of class struggle politics that bases itself on bringing ordinary people into City Hall instead of making backroom deals with businesses and corporate politicians caught your eye and made you pay attention to Shama. We all watched in horror this week as a right-wing racist rally seized the Capitol building in an attempt to overturn a Democratic election. Just last night, it was announced that 2 Seattle police officers were involved in the right-wing rally. This is scandalous, but hardly shocking. It also demonstrates why we need an elected civilian oversight board with subpoena powers. The right wing is testing the waters across the country, including backing this recall right here in Seattle against Shama. The right wing is getting organized, and they have powerful billionaire donors bankrolling their efforts. We haven't gotten the decision of the Washington Supreme Court yet, but we have no illusion that courts are friends of working class people. From legalizing slavery to Jim Crow, from supporting dragging Indigenous people off their land to separating families, the courts have well over a century of blood on their hands. This is not where we look for justice, especially not in a recall system that neither judges the veracity of the claims brought forward nor gives the accused an opportunity to testify on their own behalf. Working class people have always gotten their justice through organizing. And that's why I'm glad to have all of you here today. It's why I'm proud to introduce you to the community organizers speaking today in solidarity with Shama. My name is Castill Hightower, and I'll be co-emceeing this rally today. UAW 4121, which represents academic workers at the University of Washington, which truly takes up the mantle of working class politics. They fight not just when there's a contract to be won, but also bring their membership out to fight for housing, for a Green New Deal, and to tax big businesses. Please welcome Sharon Crowley.
I'm quite honored to be here among all of you. So yeah, I'm Sharon Crowley. I'm a member and an organizer with my union, UAW Local 4121. Our union consists of 6,000 academic workers at the University of Washington, undergraduate and graduate students and postdocs. Our members are active and engaged in the continual work of organizing, building and strengthening our power to take on big fights. Some of these fights are close to home. They're close to home, as we organize on campus for fair contracts to improve the wages, benefits, rights, and protections of student and postdoc workers at UW. Currently, UW postdocs are negotiating their second contract, while UW academic student employees will start bargaining sometime next month. In past negotiations sessions, in previous contract fights, we have always known that we could count on Shama to be there when we needed support to win on key issues. But our fights don't just begin and end with our contracts. They can't, because it's all connected. Struggles for rights and for justice, racial justice, LGBTQ justice, economic justice, housing justice, environmental justice, the list could go on and on. In these struggles, there is no inside, there is no outside. The work we do on campus and within our union, whether it's engaging in negotiations, enforcing our contract, or organizing to put pressure on the university to do the right things for example, for the custodial workers on campus or the laundry workers who are, wash all of the uniforms that our doctors and nurses and lab workers at UW depend on. So all of this stuff is important, it's of course, but it's one piece. The larger work that we all must do is the work of organizing for rights and for justice. Campus-wide, citywide, statewide, nationwide, and worldwide. We could not win our fights on campus without the solidarity of our allies in the community. So our union has been fighting alongside Councilmember Shama Sawant from the beginnings of her political movement in Seattle, just as she has fought alongside us. She has been there for our fights with the university, lending her voice and the strength of her office to help us win fair contracts and strengthen discrimination and harassment protections on campus, to win gender affirming healthcare for our members and more. Likewise, we have stood with Shama in the struggle for a $15 minimum wage, a fight which we also brought to the university so that hourly student workers could earn a fair wage as they put themselves through school. UW tried to claim that they didn't have to honor the $15 minimum wage because they were like the Vatican City. Shama was there to help us push back against that and say, no, you're not the Vatican City. That's ridiculous. And they eventually, because of our organizing efforts, they instituted a $15 minimum wage, not just on the Seattle campus, but system-wide, including the Bothell and Tacoma campuses as well. More recently, we joined the fight for the Amazon tax, turning out to help build the strategy. We helped phone and text people to build support, both among our members and in the community. We collected signatures, and we helped to put public pressure on elected officials to ensure that this tax would happen and that we would be able to raise the revenue that we need for permanently affordable, green, union-built social housing so that poor and working people, our members included, but not just our members, of course, can afford to live in the city where we all work. So again, let me be clear, we fight together, we support each other, and we stand in solidarity with each other because our fights are the same. It's all the same fight. There's no boundary between the work that we're all doing. Solidarity doesn't work that way. Solidarity means that we all work together to make things better for everyone, and especially to fight together for the most vulnerable among us. So of course we're here standing in solidarity with Shama against this racist, wrong-headed right-wing recall attack. In the most recent election, we joined the huge grassroots movement to help Shama win re-election against an unprecedented level of corporate money that was leveraged against her campaign. All of us together, our union and all of you, we won that fight, just like we all worked together to win earlier fights for racial and economic justice. On the one hand, this recall attack is an outrage. Of course it is. It's being funded by the richest people among us, big business, corporate executives, developers, all of whom have been pulling in record profits off the backs of poor and working people during this COVID emergency. On the other hand, this recall attack is a sign that we're doing a lot of things right. It's motivated by fear of Shama's persistence as a city council member, her effectiveness at getting things done, and her steadfast determination to fight for the rights of all of us. When the first Amazon tax was passed by the city council and then quickly repealed a month later, when Jeff Bezos and his cronies threatened a referendum, Shama didn't give up. We didn't give up. Our movement didn't give up. Instead, we regrouped, we re-strategized. We came up with a plan that we knew could win, and we did win. Just like we won the fight for 15, the ban on chemical weapons used by the police, the fight for affordable housing in Seattle, for police accountability, and for renters' rights in the face of unprecedented losses of employment and income during COVID that has put so much pressure on all of us and our communities. We can win this fight too. We must win, just as we've won before. Now more than ever, we need champions like Shama who will continue to build this fighting movement of, by, and for poor and working people. The past week has been a roller coaster ride at the national level. It seems a little too easy to bring this up, but I think it's instructive. In the same day, we witnessed historic lows and highs as right-wing insurrectionists violently overran the US Capitol building and threatened our democracy. At the same time, quite literally unfolding during the same news cycle, we witnessed the results of an incredible organizing effort in Georgia, as not one but both contested Senate seats were won by Democratic challengers. Reverend Raphael Warnock will be the first ever African-American person to represent the state of Georgia in the US Senate. This is huge. And we can't let ourselves be distracted by the spectacle of what happened in the Capitol such that we don't recognize the incredible victory of the Georgia Senate fight. The right-wing threat is real. They are organized. It's continuing. Getting rid of Trump will not end it. Just like winning against the right-wing threat here in Seattle is not going to be the end. It's real. This recall effort against Shama Sawant won't be the last attack we have to fend off. But let's learn from the positive too. We have reason to be optimistic. We have won many fights alongside Shama here in Seattle. Our comrades in Georgia have won a huge nationally visible fight this week. We prevailed by organizing, by building power together and coming together to stand in solidarity.
Our next speaker is a real powerhouse. Shukri Olow is a political candidate running for the King County Council District, District 5, which represents many of the suburbs where working class people and families of color have been displaced from Seattle due to rising rents and many other gentrification factors. So please put your hands together and welcome Shukri Olow.
Thank you so much, Emily. It is a pleasure to be here today speaking on behalf of my community, but also as myself as a candidate. My name is Shukri. I am a doctoral candidate, a mother. I live in South King County, and I'm a political candidate for King County Council District 5. And I have been and will continue to be a friend of Shama. I first met Shama when I worked for the Seattle Housing Authority, and the organization had this policy called Stepping Forward. And during the many community meetings at Yesler Terrace and at High Point and at Rainier Vista and at New Holly, many organizers and Shama's team coined this policy stepping backwards, which was quite funny at the time. This was a policy that would have displaced immigrants and refugees, working class people out of their units so that folks who've been on the wait list could then take those units. This would have been a policy that would have created division and tension within the community. And in those public meetings, community said no, and that policy failed. And while I was working within the organization, I did not support that policy. Many internally also did not support that policy, but it was powerful to have organizers like Shama and Ubah Warsame who told the Housing Authority, no, this will not work and you cannot do this, and were able to win. I also met Shama in a rally for this mother and other tenants who lived in this apartment complex in South Seattle who were about to be displaced as well because their rent tripled. I think initially it was like $500, and then that 2-bedroom unit housing that 4-person family became $1,500 a month. And that family was about to become homeless. Shama showed up, as she always does, in community with so many other organizers and said, no, this will not work. And that policy failed. We all know who's behind this effort, folks. We know what they're trying to do and their intention, but we also know that they will not win, because in the history of our country, injustice does not win. Well, I want to tell you who this policy or this recall effort will impact. And this is not just about Shama, right? This is about Mama Fadumo, who in Yesler Terrace encouraged immigrants and refugees, East African Somalis, our friends from the Southeast Asian community, who encouraged them to vote, and they did. And we won, right? This is about Murgitu, who was on the ground organizing in community, making sure that people no longer feel like they are on the menu, right? Because we have leaders, elected officials like Shama advocating for them. And we won, and we will continue to win. Folks, I want to leave you with a quote by Audre Lorde. And she says, "I was going to die sooner or later, whether or not I had even spoken myself. My silences had not protected me. Your silences will not protect you. What are the words you do not yet have? What are the tyrannies you swallow day by day and attempt to make your own, until you will sicken and die of them, still in silence? We have been socialized to respect fear more than our own need for language. And today, we will not be silenced. I support Shama, and this effort will not win." Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shukri. I think that was incredibly powerful. Your testimony really underscores, right, how important an organizing beacon Shama's office is for us all, right? Many of you have probably heard at one point or another, or maybe multiple times, Shama say, "When we fight, we win." And I'm asking everyone who is here today to join us in this fight, right? Not to just be a spectator, but to be side by side in this struggle. You'll see in the comments of your live stream a link to a volunteer form. I'm asking everyone to open it up, to fill it out wherever you are. You'll see there's a social media ask, there's a phone banking ask. So all of this is things that can be done in a socially distanced way. And I'm going to pause, right? I'm going to give that moment of silence for you to look at your schedule and think, can I phone bank this Sunday? Can I turn up? Can I make sure that this beacon of organizing, of working class politics can continue to organize, can continue to be in place, that we do not allow the right wing to score a victory at this crucial moment, right? Because it's going to take all of us. It's not enough to do it in the ones and twos. We need to do it in the hundreds. So hopefully everyone has opened up that link and that they are filling it out and they're going to hit submit, right? They're not just going to leave it to sit on their screen and wonder, oh, I'll think about it later, but actually submit that right now, right? So that we can follow up, that our grassroots organizers can ask, can you turn out? And we can phone bank the people in this district and let them know about this imminent threat against Shama Sawant's Socialist City Council office. I'm going to hand it over to Castill to introduce our next speaker, and I hope everyone has filled out the volunteer form.
When Shama Sawant was first elected, newspapers across the globe carried headlines about the socialists shaking up in the US. In the 7 years since Shama took office, we've seen countless examples of how our struggles here in Seattle are linked to struggles all over the world, where people are fighting for the same things we are. Today, workers across the globe are being pushed into struggle against unemployment and cuts to vital public services. Our next speaker, Mick Berry, is a proud socialist member of the Irish Parliament and is currently active in the fight against mass layoffs being organized by workers in one of the UK's biggest department stores, Debenhams. Mick and the Socialist Party, of which he is a member, also participated in the historic campaign, which just 3 years ago won abortion rights for Irish women for the first time, a victory that inspired the recent heroic victory on abortion rights in Argentina. Please join me in welcoming Mick Berry.
How you doing? So, solidarity from Europe, solidarity from Ireland, where we have a freezing night here tonight, and news coming through that it's quite possible that the health service here be overwhelmed next week, the underfunded health service, by the virus. But I want to start by saying that I am an admirer of Shama Sawant and the work that she does with her socialist alternative colleagues in Seattle, very much so. A great Irish activist and socialist, James Connolly, once said that the election of a socialist to public office is only valuable insofar as it returns a disturber of the political peace. And I think Shama has been a tremendous disturber of a rotten political peace. I think we saw that with the 15 Now campaign. I think we saw that with the Amazon tax campaign and a wide variety of other campaigns, which we've watched from a distance with great admiration. I think that there are many figures and leaders on the left in the United States whose names are known here in Ireland. People like Bernie Sanders, AOC, the Squad. But I think that many activists here have a particular watch particularly for the words and actions of Shama Sawant because of her distinct and hard and revolutionary edge to her politics. And I was thinking earlier, what are outstanding qualities, what are outstanding things that make Shama stand out with her politics? And I'm sure that there's more, but three things came to my mind. First of all, the way in which she uses her elected public position as a tool to help mobilize working class people and the oppressed to make for real social change. I think it's been powerful. I think the way in which she has explained the need for a break with the two-party system and the need for a third party, a party which would be for working people and minorities against the politics of the corporations, has really stood out. And I think as well, her, I'll call it her socialist vision, her opposition to the dictatorship of big business, and her support for a genuine democratic and socialist alternative in the US and internationally. I think for all of these reasons and more that the other speakers have explained and will explain, this is a fight that's worth fighting and that's worth trying to win. Of course, I am a comrade of Shama's in the International Socialist Alternative Organization. The virus is international. The system, capitalism, which puts profits before people, is international. And socialism must be international. Socialists need to organize internationally to challenge that system. I think not so much in a kind of a loose international federation, but more in a tight-knit organization that can challenge the concentrated class power and exploitation that we're up against. And I'm proud to stand in solidarity with Shama and to be part of this rally this evening. Of course, people who raise their heads above the parapet and take a stand for working people, especially leaders who do that, have always and forever had people who have a world to lose trying to organize to stop them by any means necessary. In this part of the world recently, we saw the leader of the UK Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, an anti-racist campaigner since his early teenage years, being smeared by the English corporate media for being an anti-Semite, which of course he never was, not a hint of it. The irony, newspapers who have stirred the racial pot themselves many a time down through the years. And oftentimes the lie gets halfway across the world before the truth gets a chance to put its boots on. The men and women that Lenin described as the agents of capitalism in the ranks of the workers' movement, the leaders of the Labour Party there, of course, took their chances to use this situation to try and take disciplinary action against him as well. In the United States is the home and the origin of red baiting, a long tradition of workers, leaders and fighters being red baited by people who do the dirty work of the establishment. But for as long as there has been red baiting in the United States, there have been capable and strong leaders who have stood up to it. And some of them have stood up to it with real defiance and with a certain style as well. I'm reminded of the words of the New York transport workers leader in the 1950s, a member of the Communist Party, an Irishman, Red Mike Quill, who stood up to red baiting with defiance. And when the fingers of accusation were pointed at him, he said that he would rather be called a red by a rat than called a rat by a red. And I think the same kind of proud, defiant attitude characterizes Shama's stance and will characterize the stance of your campaign. I want to appeal to every single person who is part of this call to get behind this campaign, to be as active as you humanly possibly can, and to dig as deep into your pockets as you possibly can as well. This is a campaign that is worth fighting. I think it can be won, and I sincerely hope that it will be won. And I'll finish my remarks with words that are often wrongly attributed to Mahatma Gandhi. Never said it. It was actually first said by a trade union activist from the United States nearly 100 years ago, who said, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. I hope we win. Best of luck with the campaign. Best of luck, Shama.
Thank you, Mick. After years of struggle, including walkouts against Trump's Muslim ban in support of the Me Too movement, it's no surprise Google workers reached the conclusion that they need a union. The new Alphabet Workers Union, named after Google's parent company, Alphabet, is organizing workers at every level of the company. Our speaker today is an active member in the Alphabet Workers Union. Like many tech workers, they are an immigrant here on an H-1B work visa. This means that Google could legally revoke their visa and have them deported at any time for speaking up and getting organized. To protect this worker and the critical organizing they are involved in, they're speaking to us today anonymously. Please join me in welcoming them and committing to fight for a world where they can safely and freely express their voice without fear of deportation.
Hi, everyone. I'm a Google employee and a dues-paying member of the newly public Alphabet Workers Union in association with Communication Workers of America. We're composed of temps, vendors, contractors, and full-time employees, and we're inviting workers across all the job roles who make Google and its parent company Alphabet run. Our union drive only went public this week, but the whispers of labor organizing have gone on for years, and at least in Seattle, even before joining CWA, we came together as a union of like-minded workers over a year ago just by deciding to be one. I'm speaking today in my own personal capacity, not on behalf of our union, but just as a worker who strongly supports Shama's council office after seeing all the good that's come from having a socialist in public office fighting for working people. And we'll see where our union's relationship to electoral politics and officials goes as it develops. But as a rank and file union member and strong supporter of the Shama Solidarity campaign, I'm here because I've seen the victories won for workers through Shama and a socialist fighting strategy, like using the city budget process to fight for working people, combat austerity, and organizing the workers and oppressed people who are left behind when the establishment prioritizes big business. As a tech worker, the Tax Amazon campaign is especially close to home because tech companies have become tremendously rich and powerful, built from the labor of workers like myself. But we have to fight to ensure this wealth and power is used to benefit society, not just hoarded by executives and shareholders. The Amazon tax puts some of that wealth back toward creating union jobs, building affordable, permanently rent-controlled housing and Green New Deal initiatives. And I hope our union can be active in struggles like this in the future because a lot of tech workers like myself support these demands. We saw that in Shama's 2019 re-election victory, when the largest number of her campaign owners by industry were tech workers. Now, I don't want my anonymity today to make people think that we need to just keep operating in secrecy. There are people in riskier situations than mine who have spoken publicly with responsibly with their name. And to clarify, I'm not on the H-1B visa, but a different one. But my decision is respecting the personal circumstances and wishes of my family. But it's public and vocal solidarity with fellow workers, not secrecy, that gives true protection from retaliation. And retaliation is a legitimate concern we've all had, considering Google's track record. In 2018, Google pushed leaders of the women's walkout out of the company after 20,000 workers walked away from their desks to expose the discrimination, harassment, and abuse women and others face in the company. In 2019, Google fired the Thanksgiving Four for bogus claims about accessing confidential documents, even though the documents were already shared company-wide with company-wide access permissions, and even though Google claims they promote an open culture and curiosity to read documents outside your team. And these people tried holding Google to an ethical standard, like Google's involvement with Border Patrol, and they were punished. In 2020, again, Google fired Dr. Timnit Gebru, an AI ethics researcher and a Black woman who was criticizing the diversity and inclusion efforts, fired with similar flimsy justification. And now, like Google, the ruling class is retaliating against Shama Sawant for being such a consistent fighter for working people, explicitly even calling up her support for Black Lives Matter as promoting lawlessness and a racist dog whistle. Worker power works. At Google, we organized to stop Project Maven, Google's collaboration with the US military. We stopped Project Dragonfly, Google's project to create censored search in China, and we won an end to forced arbitration for harassment grievances after the women's walkout. Outside Google, Shama fought alongside workers in the fight for 15, including fast food workers who walked off the job demanding $15 in a union. Through worker power and with socialist leadership, we won the $15 minimum wage, the historic Amazon tax, and renters' rights like the ban on winter evictions. But despite the victories within Google and Alphabet, many of our organizing goals have been dismissed and ignored by those in power. Our old approach is reaching its limit, and to democratically wield our worker power, we need the organization and structure to control and maybe to withhold our labor, to challenge the capitalist class in the only form they can care about under the system, profits. Now, some point to our lack of majority, but recognition as a majority union under US labor law from the NLRB is only a tool. The true power of a union comes from our ability to organize collectively as workers and speak with a unified voice. A majority contract would be great, but we'll only get there by organizing publicly and proudly and calling this what it is, a union. Now, some question why tech workers even need a union when many tech workers are well paid and well treated. But for one thing, not everyone is, because we want to represent all Alphabet workers, not just the well-paid engineers people might think of. Even among engineers, there are inequities based on the artificial division between full and part-time workers who often do the same work, and between the majority versus the many underrepresented and undercompensated groups. Winning a union contract with a scale of wages and benefits for workers would be a huge step forward to combat disparities like this, like the gender pay gap. And for another reason, I hope what I've already said shows that pay is not the only issue here. Tech companies wield tremendous power with little other than the free market to rein them in, and the market is accountable to profits, not people. The time for tech unions is upon us now. In 2018, we saw Game Workers Unite seek to unionize fellow tech workers in gaming. In 2019, Google's Bay Area cafeteria workers unionized. Then 2019 and 2020, Kickstarter unionized. We haven't seen a tech company the size of Alphabet unionized yet, but the labor movement has a long history that we're happy to be a part of. And we have CWA to support and guide us. And we're going to need friends of labor like Shama in the workers' struggles ahead, like she did fighting alongside Teamster school bus drivers in their strike and REI workers in their fight for fair scheduling and a $15 starting wage. Now, despite what a lot of people say, Google's policy does actually still include the phrase, "don't be evil" somewhere, but it's not the slogan anymore, which just feels like a poetic coincidence with a moral degradation that we've all been feeling. That's inevitable in corporations under capitalism, because that's where profit matters, not people collaborating to better society, which is what ideally a company would be. That's why we need to come together as workers to democratically hold big business accountable. I'm proud that we have someone like Shama in office who unapologetically fights for workers despite opposition from corporations and billionaire right-wing donors like Martin Selig. Solidarity.
Thank you so much to our anonymous Google worker. I know the news of Google unionizing shot across my news feed and had lots of people in my network really excited to see this important step forward. We've seen labor, on the back foot for decades in this country, and I think new ununionized workers collaborating together to decide to found new unions is an absolutely important next step, and very much appreciated all the things that were said about the role that Shama has played in using her office to highlight the struggles of hotel workers, of academic workers, of also, I think importantly of, they don't get talked about as tech workers, but of Uber and Lyft drivers, right, who've had to organize against these tech behemoths. So one of the next speaker that I'm excited to introduce, I believe he's also a tech worker, and he's also a vice chair of Seattle DSA. I think a lot of people today have mentioned, that part of what makes Shama such a powerhouse of an organizer is her socialist politics, right? And since Shama has been elected in office, we've seen the meteoric rise of the DSA nationally. And I think, internationally, people have watched and wondered, will this be the change, the sea change in politics in the United States, in the belly of the beast, right? And I know I've been really excited also to be part of this broad tent socialist organization, and I'm excited to introduce Justin Roll, the vice chair of Seattle DSA.
Cool. Thanks, Emily. I really appreciate that introduction. And again, I'm really humbled to speak here amongst, so many amazing people. It's truly humbling. So I'll try and be brief to make space for everybody else. But yeah, things are a little hot right now. We're dealing with not only a global pandemic, but a global recession. As Castill, Sharon, and others have mentioned, we recently saw basically a far-right mob storm into the Capitol, emboldened by Trump and other members of the GOP's calls to overturn the results of the election. And obviously, these are different situations, but we're seeing a little bit of a pattern here. Right-wing capitalists lose an election that they had every advantage in terms of money and resources. And then what do? They reject democracy and attempt to overturn, the results of the election. So I mean, Councilmember Shama Sawant was just sworn in like almost exactly 1 year ago. Many of us here worked pretty hard to get her elected in November of 2019. I know I did a little bit myself. Together, we put in countless volunteer hours against an opposition that was just pouring in, corporate cash. And now they're rejecting democracy, trying to remove Councilmember Sawant in a low turnout, probably recall election, when many working people are just overwhelmed trying to get by. And if this recall were to succeed, there'd be national ramifications. The far right would be emboldened. We could see these recalls happen in other places all across the country. The rich could pour money into removing democratically elected, left-wing, DSA-endorsed, otherwise, candidates. But probably a lot of people on this call are in Seattle, and there'd be some serious local ramifications here as well. A lot of what Shama has gotten done, whether it be, the fight for 15, the winter eviction moratorium, Amazon tax, voting to defund the Seattle Police Department in every single budget she's been in office, all of this probably doesn't need a big introduction here, but needless to say, if you're a person who needs to work to live, Shama has almost certainly, worked to pass some policy that's in your interest. But the thing I like about Shama is that she doesn't just write policy. As others have said, Shama Sawant has been a champion for social movements, using her office to amplify the demands of working people and the most marginalized. And these movements are really how we actually win. And we've seen this, whether it be through the fight for 15 or more recently, we've seen social movements achieve real wins. Like just this summer and fall, the Black-led movement to defund the Seattle Police Department scored a big win, defunding SPD by 18%. And we need to keep amplifying the demands of Black organizers. We need to keep fighting till we defund SPD by 50% at least. And like the previous speaker, I'm a tech worker, and like they were saying, tech workers are starting to organize and realize their power as workers. I'm really encouraged by the formation of the Alphabet Union at Google. And here in Seattle, a little more locally, I'm really encouraged by the tech workers at University of Washington's IHME unionizing for better pay and worker protections. This has been a little bit undercovered in local media, I feel like. I myself have been, intimidated by HR at a certain big tech company for workplace activism. So, a big reason I also support Shama is because I want more protections in the workplace. I want more democracy in my workplace. I want a union. And Shama would use her platform to stand in solidarity with not just tech workers, but all other workers in these kinds of struggles. Shama knows that we need to build worker power. So yeah, like I said, when I introduced myself, I'm a member of Seattle Democratic Socialist of America. We've proudly voted, here in our local to endorse the Shama Solidarity campaign. I think that as socialists, it's extremely important that we stand together against right-wing racism and greed. And Seattle DSA's endorsement of this campaign doesn't just mean that we're putting out, a nice statement or making a couple tweets. Our endorsement of Shama Solidarity campaign is material. Our membership plans to organize to fight this recall. And so I'm asking you, whether you're on the call or watching, on YouTube or whatever stream, not just to support this effort with your vote, but to get involved, talk to your neighbors, and organize. Join the fight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Justin. And yeah, I think I noticed while you were speaking a certain classic red and white picket sign in the background that I think anyone who's seen a picture of, City Hall, Seattle City Hall, while Shama has been in office there, would recognize. And, they've got lots of iconic slogans on them, but the one that I recognized on your wall seemed really appropriate, following up on the Alphabet Workers Union, as well as your comments, which is unions make us strong, right? And I think these picket signs, something that I've noticed in the time that I've lived in Seattle while Shama's been in office, is that you can walk through District 3 and you just glance up at a window, right? And apartments and houses everywhere will just have one of these iconic red and white signs. Maybe it says unions make us strong. Maybe it says we need rent control. Maybe it says no ban, no wall, right? The various fights that Shama has really used her office to amplify. So that was a really inspiring crossover. And of course, very much I'm excited and inspired to see Seattle Democratic Socialists of America endorsing the Shama Solidarity campaign, and heartened to hear that that's very material. I want to say last time I heard a report, we had 34 people had filled out the volunteer card. I want to encourage you, if you were excited by what Justin had to say, that you do take that moment to fill out that volunteer card now. So our next speaker is also speaking on behalf of labor and of unions. Some of you may be familiar with Sarah Nelson. She's been, I think, one of the real labor powerhouses of the last few years in the role that she played, especially standing toe-to-toe against Donald Trump, enforcing the end of the dangerous, disastrous government shutdown in 2019, using the power of workers, of the flight attendants, to force the government to reopen. And Sarah herself, because she's been grappling with, both the crisis of COVID in her union, but also we've seen, the real flashpoint in the past week of them grappling with all the right-wing racists who flew to DC for the events there. So Sarah herself was not able to make it, but she did write us a solidarity statement. And Molly Whitaker, who's a member of the Laborers Union, is going to read that solidarity statement for us in Sarah Nelson instead. So please give a warm welcome to Molly.
Thank you, Emily. It's good to be here. I'm honored to read this statement from a fellow worker, Sarah Nelson. Says, I wish I could have joined you today, but please know I am standing in solidarity with every one of you. If there's one key lesson we must take from 2020, it's that solidarity is the only way working people can thrive in America and around the world. The year began with tremendous promise in Seattle when voters re-elected Shama Sawant and a pro-worker majority on the city council. Across the country, we look to your victory over Amazon and the corporate profiteers who want to extract every dollar from the people without giving a cent back. Then the pandemic hit and our entire world was turned upside down. In aviation, demand dropped 97% overnight. We needed huge, fast action to keep millions of aviation workers off the unemployment lines. But my union drove a workers' first plan that required airlines to keep us in our jobs and connected to healthcare, exactly what many countries in Europe did for every worker. We also capped executive compensation and banned stock buybacks. We mobilized our members and fought alongside aviation unions. Make no mistake, we won because aviation is 80% unionized and because we spoke with one voice. But millions of workers didn't have a union to fight for them, and many in unions had their hands tied by bad laws designed to stifle our voices. Even so, workers from every industry woke up this year to realize that they did need power at work and felt the pull of solidarity in a way they've never felt before. Workers are ready for something new. Our country, our world is ready to rise. But so are our opponents. More than 100 years ago, Mother Jones said, the capitalists are always organizing. It's easy to see what she meant. A crisis becomes an opportunity for men like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk to tighten their grip on workers' throats and on the levers of power. Corporate thieves are driving the narrative of scarcity in an attempt to get workers to accept unsafe conditions, the isolation of the hog economy, and every other way to profit off the crisis for working people and the communities where we live. And now in Seattle, those forces are trying to undo the will of the voters and recall one of the fiercest voices standing against them in this city. Seattle, I urge you to stand together now. I know you can't turn to a person next to you or a person behind you and tell them, I've got your back, but I want you to say it out loud wherever you are. Say it now. Let the words fill you with the power of solidarity. I've got your back. Again, I've got your back. This recall election is a naked power grab by some of the wealthiest, most powerful people in the world. They will not be satisfied until they have everything. The only way to stop them is together. Shama, friends, allies, I stand with you. I've got your back. Let's show them what working people can do together.
Thank you, Molly. And of course, thank you, Sarah. In my family's struggle to get Seattle police to release the records of my brother's murder, one thing I learned is that establishment can ignore one voice. They can even ignore an entire family's voice. But an organized community, a movement, that is simply something they cannot just ignore. I'm going to ask all of you to become a part of an action group so you can stay linked into the most up-to-date ask for this fight. In the chat room on your live stream, you'll see a link for a Facebook action group. Please join. I'll give folks a second to do that now. And if you're not on Facebook, I want you to follow us on Twitter and DM our account that you want to be in a Twitter action chat where we can share updates. Our next speaker is Jean Swanson. Jean was elected to the City Council in Vancouver, British Columbia in 2018 as a member of the Coalition of Progressive Electors, an independent party whose platform and fighting approach have been directly influenced by Shama and the victories she has helped win in Seattle. Please join me in welcoming Jean Swanson.
Hi, everyone. I'm really honored to have been asked to speak here and support your movements and to support Shama. I'm Jean Swanson. I'm a city councilor in Vancouver. I'm on the stolen territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples. And I'd like to thank these peoples for taking care of this land for millennia and commit to trying to get them compensated for it or get it back to them. Here in Vancouver, we have a housing crisis, a crisis of housing affordability. Working people are getting pushed out of the city and the region, and we have the worst crisis of homelessness that I've seen in 40 years. I understand that you have the same crisis in Seattle. The crises have a common root: big developers and landlords who want to treat housing as a commodity and extract profit from it so that it doesn't become a human right to housing. In fact, in some cases, it's the same people who operate globally and exploit tenants and workers in your country and in Canada. We have Jeff Bezos here, we have Amazon, and we have Chip Wilson and Lululemon. He has the most expensive house in Vancouver. Kshama has been a leading fighter for housing justice. She knows it will take movements to win. Up here in Vancouver, we're inspired by all the victories that Shama, Socialist Alternative, and the broader movement have won, like the Amazon tax, the winter eviction moratorium, and tenant organizing that has rolled back rent increases. We also experienced the climate crisis in Vancouver. Naturally, there's no border in the fight for climate justice. When it's smoky in Seattle, it's smoky in Vancouver. And I know that Shama has worked with movements to fight for climate justice, as well as here in Vancouver. We're incredibly inspired to learn that part of the Amazon tax is being used to fund Green New Deal projects. This is a sort of concrete movement building victory that inspires people beyond Seattle and beyond the US. When you win these movement victories, it's a win for working people everywhere. By the same token, the same forces that are fighting all of us, the big developers, big oil, big banks, politicians who claim they support our interests but abandon us when it matters most, they know that if they can defeat Shama in Seattle, they will then come to my city and other cities and attack our movements. We can't let that happen. So even if I didn't know Shama, and even if I didn't appreciate her socialist analysis and her movement building skills, and even if she didn't support and encourage me when I was running for office 2 years ago, I would say that we have to defend Shama and the movement against recall, because recall is an attack on working people everywhere. If the right wing wins this recall in Seattle, they'll come after our movements here in Vancouver with redoubled energy. So it's really important that Shama stay elected. And I just wanted to say, Shama came up here to help me before I was elected, and she gave a speech and I took notes on it. And it was advice for politicians, progressive politicians, if you get elected. So I just wanted to say what the notes were. Shama, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Don't negotiate backroom deals. Open up your office at City Hall to working class people. Use your position as a political insider to build up the numbers and power of progressive activists on the outside. Understand that we're in a class war initiated by the ultra rich. View your battles through an international lens. Fight the logic of the capitalist system. Remember that even small victories are contagious, and they really are. Don't follow the polite rules of traditional civic politics. Identify who is with your cause and who's opposed to it. You need to have the political courage to make enemies in high places. And if you lose, go down fighting. So, you know, there's yet another reason to get out there and try to stop this recall. It's so important that Shama stay elected and stay able to work on the inside for the justice issues that all of you are working for on the outside, not just for Seattle, but actually for Canada and the whole world. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jean. The international solidarity is really, really inspiring. And yeah, I think everybody feels like they could use that inspirational poster on their wall to get them up in the morning of you know, the things to remember as an organizer in office. So throughout this stream, we've been periodically sharing ways for people to get involved, right? And that's because we're up against, sorry, I ate a gummy bear before I started. But yeah, we want people to actually be active in this. And that's not just sort of a rhetorical thing that we repeat. This is vitally necessary, right? We've seen just a couple of the people who've donated to the recall election. The vast majority of them have chosen to remain anonymous because they don't want to be associated publicly, or they don't want their right-wing credentials to actually expose what's behind this recall. But for the few who have shared their names, there's been a huge proportion that are real estate moguls, real estate investors. And why is that? I think it's because they've seen over the 7 years that Shama's been in office, she's been an absolute leader on winning tenants' rights. She uses her office to host tenants' rights boot camps so that tenants can be knowledgeable about what their existing rights are. And as someone who's been actively looking for new housing, believe me, landlords will constantly try to misrepresent what the rules actually are. And we've also seen—
Jonathan wrote it.
Uh-oh. And we've seen, yeah, that also for things like, as Shukri spoke about, the stepping forward struggle, that Shama's office has been a key space for organizing. And real estate moguls don't want to see that, right? They want to see their profits remain high, a steady stream of income. And that's why they are donating big to try to recall Shama Sawant. So big that they've raised well over $200,000. And so it's with that backdrop, with that sort of fear in our belly, that I am honored to introduce Matt Smith, who is a member of Socialist Alternative and is going to do the financial appeal for us today.
Hi, everybody. My name is Matt Smith. Like Emily said, I'm a member of Socialist Alternative. I'm an activist in the Shama Solidarity campaign. It's incredible to see everyone here, hundreds of people. I think we have over 800 people last time I looked at the stream, coming together to defend our Socialist City Council member, Shama Sawant, from this right-wing recall attack. Because as all of us know, as every speaker has highlighted today, this isn't just an attack on Shama, it's an attack on all of us. It's an attack on our entire movement. And why are they afraid of us? Why have they fought so hard to remove Shama from office repeatedly over the years? It's because of our success. It's because they can't stand having even one working class fighter in office, someone who doesn't bow down to the status quo. And it's because of the victories that our movement has won and the platform that our movement can stand on through Shama's council seat. This movement has won a whole string of victories for working people, the $15 minimum wage, the first in the nation winter evictions ban, the Amazon tax for affordable housing. I could go on, but we've won all those victories, every single one, because working people have been prepared to get organized and make big sacrifices to fight for what we need. And now, because of that success, because of our success, our movement is under attack by big business and the right wing once again. And we're here today to make sure that that attack fails. In a minute, I'm going to ask you to make a donation to the Shama Solidarity campaign. We have a goal today of raising $12,000. It's a big goal. And if we're going to hit that goal, we need everyone here to make a real sacrifice to defend our movement. The maximum donation for the campaign is $1,000 for an individual or $2,000 for a married couple. So really consider today if you can afford to give that maximum amount of $1,000. We're not billionaires, and that's a lot of money for any of us. But if we want a movement that's accountable to us, it's us who have to fund it. And we're up against very powerful forces. So if you can give that whole $1,000 today, or again, $2,000 for a married couple, that's huge. If you can give that, all in one big chunk, that's great. You can also schedule it out over a monthly donation to the campaign. So if you need to break it up over several months, you should absolutely take that option. But not everyone can give the maximum. So think about how much you're able to give and then push a little further, dig a little bit deeper. Think about how much you're willing to give to make sure that the right wing fails in this attack against our movement. Now, I'm going to call out a series of dollar amounts. And if you're able to give that amount, post your pledge in the chat first on the YouTube or the Facebook live stream, and then go to the donation link that will be posted in that chat. Make your donation right away. We want to get these donations right now, today during this stream. So at the end of the event, we can announce hopefully that we've smashed through that target, raised over $12,000. So again, watch for that donation link in the chat, post your pledge there, and then go right to that website and put your donation in. One more thing before we start. We have a lot of international supporters tuning into the stream. Thank you to Mick Berry for being here from Ireland. We have a lot of others who are watching from other countries. Unfortunately, the Solidarity Campaign can only accept donations from US citizens or green card holders. But we still want your support. If you're tuning in from some other country or you don't have, you live in the United States and you don't have a green card, we still want your support to help build the socialist movement. So if you're not a US citizen and you don't have a green card, but you want to see the kind of work Shama has done in Seattle spread across the country and beyond, you can make a donation to Socialist Alternative instead. We encourage you to do so. This is Shama's organization. So I'm going to start out with that big ask. We know the forces that we're up against. We've talked about some of them. The recall campaign has raised over $220,000, and this court decision is going to release a tidal wave of corporate cash. We know some of the people, a lot of this money is anonymous, but we know some of the people who are behind this recall. It's right-wing billionaires like Martin Selig, a notorious Trump supporter, a real estate developer. These people are already lining up to provide this recall campaign with endless amounts of money. So who today can give the maximum amount, the maximum donation of $1,000 or $2,000 for a couple to cancel out the money of the billionaires who want to stop our movement? Post in the chat if you can. And I already see a couple donations coming in for smaller amounts. Thank you, Kara, for putting that. We're going to be continuing on down. I see another couple coming through the chat. And this also applies, this $1,000 ask, anyone who's already donated to the campaign. I know there are a lot of people who have already given money. Is there anyone who's already given who can top off your donation to hit that $1,000 max? Great. Thank you, Aji, for maxing out to the campaign. That's incredible. Everyone should give them a virtual round of applause. And Kaya, thank you for pledging your stimulus. I know we have a lot of people who have gotten these stimuluses, might have more coming, and I know a lot of other people have already donated that max amount as well. So thank you to everyone who's posting and pledging, including I just saw Andrew also planning to max out. So thank you. So I'm going to move on, and not only do we know who's behind this recall, we also know what they're planning to do if they win. Already, establishment politicians in Olympia are making plans to overturn our Amazon tax victory. If they succeed in removing Shama from office, they will come after not just the Amazon tax, but every single victory that we've won. Not only that, if the political establishment removes Shama, they will feel emboldened to come after our movement even harder in Chicago, in New York, in Minnesota, and all over the country. So who here can donate $500 or more to stop them in their tracks, make sure they keep their hands off of our hard-fought victories in Seattle? All right, I see more donations coming in. And remember to look for that link in the chat where you can donate your money right now. Make sure to put that donation as soon as you give the pledge. Awesome, thank you, Tyler. All right. So we know what the right wing will do if we lose, but let's talk about also what happens if we win, when we win. If we win this campaign, we can use that victory to carry the movement forward, just like we did last year with the Amazon tax. We have a lot to fight for. We need to cancel rent and mortgage payments for the thousands of struggling workers. We need real community control of the police. We need a Green New Deal jobs program. And defending Shama's seat will put us in the best position to wage those fights and win. So who can give $200 or more to help us win those victories? Great, thank you to Richie, who's giving $1,000 to Socialist Alternative. That's an incredible sacrifice for the movement. Thank you. Great, Joshua, thank you for that $200 donation. That's incredible. $300 from Orion Drums. I don't know who that is, but thank you very much for that. All right, I see more $200. Audrey, 1980, thank you. Fantastic. All right, let's go ahead and move on and keep those donations flowing through in the chat, keep those pledges coming through, and be sure to check that donation link as well. So speaking of community control of the police, just a few days ago, we saw thousands of right-wing protesters descend on the US Capitol, abetted by the cops in support of a racist right-wing agenda. I don't need to tell everyone here what the scene would have looked like if that had been a Black Lives Matter protest. The growing right-wing movement is the result of not just 4 years of Trump, but also the complete failure of the Democratic Party to fight for working people and provide a real alternative. Joe Biden and the corporate-controlled Democratic Party are not able to solve the crisis that we're facing. Under the Democratic Party, the growth of the right wing will continue. The only way that we defeat the right is by building an independent, working class movement that actually fights for the interests of the vast majority of the population. Shama is independent of the Democratic Party and independent of corporate cash. She's accountable to our movement, and she's a critical example for thousands of socialists, millions, and workers of how we can use elected office, not to negotiate behind closed doors, but to fight unapologetically for working people. Is there anyone here who can give $100 or more to make sure that we're able to keep Shama in office as a fighting example for the whole country so that we can build the kind of movement that can shut down the far right for good? Thank you, Francis, for that $100 donation. Can anyone join in giving $100 or more? Tony, thank you. Incredible. Great, thank you, Nick, for that $100 donation. And I'm seeing that we're almost to $12,000. Let's smash this target. Keep on putting those pledges in the chat. Let's get past this target of $12,000 so that we can announce a nice big number and go way past it. And I'm going to make a final ask here. I've made a lot of big ones today, but this campaign is going to be won with thousands of grassroots donations of every amount that together really do add up. Over 2,200 people have already donated to the campaign. Those are donations of $50, $27, $15 for the Socialist who won 15. All of those represent a big sacrifice. We will need thousands more of those small donations to win this fight, in addition to all of the big sacrifices that people have made, and even these smaller amounts can really represent a big sacrifice for working people. So who here can donate $15, $50, or any amount to add your name to the list of the thousands of donors who are helping defend against this right-wing recall? Great, I'm seeing a flood of donations come in. Helen pledging another $100. Miss Rivera donated $50. Julie, thank you, $27. Great, John, another $100 from Ariel. Thank you very much. $27 from Emily. Thank you. Another $50 from Mara. Wow, another $150 donation. Thank you so much, everyone. Keep those donations flowing in. The link's getting posted again in the chat, shamasolidarity.org/donate. Remember, make your pledge in the chat so that we can all see what's going on. We can all encourage each other. Make that pledge in the chat and then go immediately to that donation page. Put your donation in so that we can reach this $12,000 by the end of the stream, and we can announce that we've smashed through that goal. Thank you, everyone, for your support. And I will give it back to Emily to continue the program. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker, a proud member of Socialist Alternative, has been elected by her constituents more times than anyone else currently serving on the Seattle City Council. Her office has spearheaded groundbreaking victories in Seattle that have spread far and wide, including the $15 an hour minimum wage, the Amazon tax, and the first in the nation bans on chemical weapons and winter evictions, among many, many others. Her unrelenting tenacity in fighting for the needs of working class and oppressed people in her district and beyond has made her some very rich and powerful enemies. We are all here today because we know how important it is for us, for our movements, to stand with her so she can keep using her office to fight for us. Please join me in welcome Seattle's Socialist City Councilmember, Shama Sawant.
Thank you, Castill. Dear friends, this recall campaign is a naked attempt by the corporate elite and right wing to undo the democratic decision of Seattle voters. They could not defeat working people and socialists at the ballot with their millions and their lies, and so now they are attempting to use the courts and their deep pockets to hold a do-over. It's striking that this undemocratic attack is taking place at the same time that extremist Trump supporters are attempting to violently overturn the presidential election results. Two of the false charges against me are retaliation for my consistent support of the Black Lives Matter movement, which has been viciously targeted by both the police and the courts. We saw the police's non-response to the horrific far-right actions at the US Capitol on Wednesday. They allowed an armed right-wing mob with the declared intent to overturn a democratic election to walk unhindered up the steps. Some police even took selfies with these right-wing Trump supporters. What a contrast to the utter brutalization of peaceful Black Lives Matter protesters by police in cities across the nation last summer. And we've just heard that at least 2 Seattle police officers were in DC on Wednesday, and that Mike Solon, the reactionary president of the Seattle Police Officers Guild, has disgustingly speculated it might be Black Lives Matter protesters who stormed the Capitol building. It is notable during her resignation announcement that former police chief Carmen Best, who had just presided over brutal attacks on the BLM protests, said to Seattle police that, quote, "You truly are the best police department in the country," end quote. The recall effort against us is part of a nationwide backlash by the right wing and political establishments of both parties against Black Lives Matter, socialists, and the left. Over 20 million people took part in the historic protests in the US last summer. The ruling class has made heavy use of the courts as well as the police against BLM protesters, resulting in over 14,000 arrests last year. We know what our movement's win has everything to do with our own organized strength, and we should have no illusions in the institutions of capitalism. We cannot rely on the courts for justice, just as we cannot rely on the police. In October, we saw the Washington Supreme Court throw out the grassroots recall campaign against Amazon's mayor, Jenny Durkin, for overseeing the violent crackdown on BLM. We should not have an ounce of complacency, however, that they will do anything of the kind with our case. With Mayor Durkin's approval, Seattle police viciously unleashed tear gas, rubber bullets, mace, and other so-called crowd control weapons on peaceful protests again and again, and the ruling class fully supported this. Yet they were horrified when our movement came to City Hall in June for an hour-long peaceful Black Lives Matter General Assembly with protesters wearing masks to demand justice for George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and to defund the police. The ruling class fully backed Jenny Durkin and Seattle police in spite of the department's killing of 28 Black and brown people since 2011 without a single conviction. But they condemned the families of those killed by Seattle police for organizing a peaceful protest near Mayor Durkin's house, along with the Democratic Socialists of America. I was honored to be invited to speak at that rally. The political establishment and right wing are taking revenge on our movement by using one of the recall charges to attack me for participating in solidarity with these families. On top of that, they falsely claim that I led the protests. I will not take credit where it's not due. I did not lead the march. I did not organize the rally. The reason they lie about this is because it's easier for them to go after one person than the whole movement. I am not the first to be attacked in this way, and I will not be the last. Socialist Alternative and I, of course, support the democratic right of ordinary people to recall elected officials. Corporate politicians routinely betray their promises and the interests of ordinary people while using their elected positions to defend the status quo of deep inequality, racism, and violence. They need to be held accountable. Nationally, tens of millions of ordinary Americans are utterly fed up that neither major party represents them. Washington State's recall law is undemocratic and unequally applied. It is well suited for retaliation against working people's representatives, in part because there is no requirement that the charges even be proven true. I will not be provided an opportunity to defend myself in court against these dishonest claims. And so, Washington courts have enormous leeway to use recall elections as a mechanism to defend the ruling class and capitalist system, greenlighting cases against the left while dismissing charges against establishment politicians, as they just did with Mayor Durkin. It's no accident that Seattle's last elected socialist, Anna Louise Strong, was driven out of office in 1919 by a recall campaign for her links to the labor movement and opposition to World War I. That same year, the great American socialist Eugene Debs was sentenced to a decade in prison for a speech he made against the World War, a sentence that was upheld by the US Supreme Court. The laws under capitalism are written by and for the elite, not for us. The genocide of native peoples and the theft of their land was legally sanctioned. The bloody institution of American slavery was once the law of the land, as was Jim Crow segregation. The lynchings that enforced segregation were not technically legal, yet no court would convict the lynchers. In what is now Washington State, the Coast Salish people were granted fishing and hunting rights to motivate the treaties they signed virtually at gunpoint, which were then subsequently and wholesale denied. Often they were rejected by the legal mechanism that they could not get fishing rights without citizenship, but then they were also denied citizenship rights in the land that they had lived on for millennia. During the civil rights era, those who fought for Black freedom were jailed again and again, while KKK leaders, killer cops, and the agents of the state who murdered the Black Panthers walked free. State violence against and brutal killings of union organizers and socialists was once commonplace. None of this is distant history. This is American capitalism. Today in Seattle, big business and the right wing are furious about the impact of socialist politics and social movements. They especially hate the inspiring example it has set for working people around the nation. They're searching for a do-over not only of our 2019 re-election, but also the historic victories spearheaded by our movement and our office. The Amazon tax to fund housing and a Green New Deal, the $15 minimum wage, the first in the nation ban on chemical weapons, and the landmark renters' rights laws like the ban on winter evictions. As we speak, city council Democrats, self-described progressives, are attempting to overturn the chemical weapons ban we won during the height of the George Floyd protests. And Democrats in the state legislature are trying again to dismantle our Amazon tax through a statewide ban on municipal big business taxes. We are calling for a new Tax Amazon Action Conference later this month on January 28th at 6 p.m. I urge you all to attend. Our movement must go all out to defend against this attack. Who's behind the recall? It's the same political and corporate establishment that tried to buy City Hall in 2019. While many of the recall donors are still lurking in the shadows and the corporate PACs have not yet been filed, we can expect more of the same. Already, we see a host of corporate executives and wealthy developers lining up behind the recall, including billionaire landlord and Trump donor Martin Selig, Airbnb Chief Financial Officer David Stevenson, Merrill Lynch Senior Vice President Matt Westfall, and Broadmark Realty Capital Chief Executive Officer Jeffrey Pyatt. Behind the scenes, corporate Democrats are helping to lead the charge. The recall petition itself is copy-pasted from Jenny Durkan's statement during the height of the Black Lives Matter protests, demanding that the city council expel me. But Democrats, big business, and the right wing have drawn lessons from the 2019 elections. They saw how their brazen efforts, led openly by Amazon in the chamber, backfired on them. This time, they are attempting to falsely portray their campaign as a grassroots effort led by ordinary people in Seattle's District 3. This is a lie, and one that will be exposed by the corporate and right-wing forces themselves as they unleash an all-out assault of dirty money. Seattle has its own version of right populist forces, such as anti-homeless group Safe Seattle, who back the recall. It has Sinclair Broadcasting and Como with their right-wing message of hate vividly shown in films like Fight for the Soul of Seattle, the sequel to the deeply bigoted Seattle is Dying film from 2019. These right-wing propaganda pieces seek to portray themselves as reasonable and even progressive, as right populists so often do. We know the corporate media will back this recall to the hilt. During my 7 years on the council, the Seattle Times has penned one hit piece after another, along with vicious red baiting and racist cartoons. They have allowed me to reply exactly once in those 7 years. This is no surprise. This is part of the role of the corporate media under capitalism to defend the system. As Noam Chomsky, who has endorsed our solidarity campaign, has said, quote, "It is their function to amuse, entertain, and inform and inculcate individuals with the values, beliefs, and codes of behavior that will integrate them into the institutional structures of the larger society. In a world of concentrated wealth and major conflicts of class interest, to fulfill this role requires systematic propaganda," end quote. This recall attack is part of a larger attempt to push Seattle politics to the right and to roll back our movement's progressive gains. The ruling class needs to rely on such attacks at a time when they are determined to make working people pay for the crisis in their system, at a time when there is massive disillusionment in the establishment and in capitalism. Undoubtedly, the armed attack on the US Capitol by the far right will be used as an excuse to go after peaceful protesters on the left. We have seen this many times in US history, as with the Smith Act of 1940. Already false parallels are being drawn between our peaceful BLM rally in Seattle City Hall and the violent right-wing Capitol attack against a Democratic election, an attack that cost 4 people's lives. This is a dishonest and dangerous comparison. The working class has always used peaceful occupations to fight for our rights. This included GM factory occupations in the 1930s, which were vital in the struggle for union rights and central to the launch of the Congress of Industrial Organizations, one of the most important and progressive events in American history. A peaceful occupation of the Capitol building in Madison was central to the Wisconsin public sector uprising in 2011, which helped lay the ground for Occupy Wall Street later that year and the re-emergence of social movements. We must firmly stand up against all these attacks on the left, on workers, and on our civil rights. We must reject these false equivalencies. Jenny Durkan has loyally served the billionaires in her time in office. She will be well rewarded by the corporate Democratic establishment, perhaps even through an appointment by the Biden administration. We will see. Big business will now need a new loyal servant at the helm, and there will be a huge battle over the election of Seattle's next mayor in the coming months. There are also 2 seats in the city council up for re-election this year. Amazon will want thoroughly corporate representatives in those positions as well to help steer the ship of state to the right. You see, what the 2019 elections and this recall campaign are really about is that big business cannot tolerate having even one elected socialist who unambiguously fights for working people in Seattle. They don't want our example to spread further, especially at a time of crisis, with tens of millions protesting and a new generation looking again to socialist ideas. I have always argued we need a new party for working people, independent of corporate cash, corporate America, and its two parties. Attacks like these show why. This is why the Solidarity Campaign began organizing a mass grassroots effort immediately after the King County Superior Court ruling in September. More than 200 working people have volunteered and 2,200 people have donated. If you haven't gotten involved already, we need you. We are fighting for COVID relief, paid for by increasing the Amazon tax we won last year. We need a guaranteed jobs program for all who are unemployed and underemployed, to cancel rent and mortgages for those who have lost jobs or significant income, and for struggling small businesses. We need to make the banks and corporate landlords pay, not renters, homeowners, or small landlords. We urgently need a democratically elected community oversight board with full powers to hold the police accountable, including the right to set policy and hire and fire officers. We need to fully fund a socialist Green New Deal in Seattle to end all fossil fuel emissions by 2030, build green affordable homes, massively expand public transit, and create thousands of clean energy jobs paid for by taxing the rich. My office is also fighting to extend the eviction moratorium through the end of this year to prevent a tsunami of evictions. Our fight to defeat the recall is tied to the nationwide urgency to defeat the right wing. Wednesday's far-right mob in DC should be understood as a wake-up call for the left. The right will continue to grow as long as there is no alternative to the status quo of corporate politics, where despite their differences, the two parties serve the interests of big business and put the burden of the COVID crisis and brutal recession on ordinary people. The best and only way to stop the far right is to build the left and social movements. This is how we are going to pull millions of ordinary people away from the right wing's influence, by building a powerful fight back for the interests of the working class. Where actual fascists are in the street, they should be met by a massive show of force led by the unions and the left. This week, we heard the inspiring announcement of employees at Google forming the Alphabet Workers Union. This is a step in the direction of what is urgently needed, the rebuilding of a militant American labor movement. We cannot expect Joe Biden or Nancy Pelosi to provide any alternatives. That is why I have endorsed the Force the Vote campaign, demanding that the Squad and other left Democrats in Congress use a floor vote on Medicare for all as part of an overall strategy to build a fighting movement for socialized medicine. Representatives of working people should not support a corporate tool like Nancy Pelosi continuing as Speaker of the House while millions face misery, as Squad members have unfortunately done. While I agree Trump should be impeached, as the Squad is now saying, this cannot be our main focus. The left has the responsibility to address the urgent needs of the working class, and that means, as a starting point, fighting tooth and nail for Medicare for all, comprehensive COVID relief, a socialist Green New Deal, and preparing the ground to launch a new party. This is a critical juncture in history, and we cannot accept a false unity with the corrupt Democratic establishment. We instead need to build a powerful unity of millions of working people and the oppressed to fight for a different kind of society. Solidarity.
Thank you so much, Shama. That was incredibly inspiring, and I think, demonstrates how, it's not just our office and Shama's office, of course, that leads the way, but also engages with all these ongoing struggles that we're living in our daily lives. And as Shama said, we're seeing all kinds of right-wing attacks. And I want to make an appeal, and folks are going to see another link dropping in the chat. I actually want to give, just actually before I make this announcement, a couple of quick updates from the finance team. And I understand this has been in the stream, but I think we're all in different streams, so just so we're all on the same page. That finance appeal, collectively, all of us, in support of holding the line on Shama's office, raised $25,000. That's just incredible. That's from over 200 unique donors who are, collaboratively standing together. And I'm so incredibly inspired by all of you. We also, through the course of Shama's speech, got another union endorsement from the National Writers Union chapter here in Washington. So we're seeing that, putting our marker down today on this event of all of us standing together, it has a huge impact, right? Like attracts like, support attracts support, solidarity attracts solidarity. And so your presence here today helps us spread the message, helps us grab other people who need to get active in this fight. And so just deep gratitude to everyone who's here today, and especially to Shama for that powerful speech. I want to point folks to a next event. We do have a number of other speakers, and I hope that people will stay on so that they can hear from these national leaders and international leaders who are just so vital to this fight. But I also want to plug the fight to defend Seattle's Amazon tax. Many of you, I know Matt, who gave that inspiring financial appeal, was an Amazon worker at the time that we were fighting for the Amazon tax. Was a huge part of that fight. But we all actually have to go on the offensive after winning it, right? Just like we won Shama's election and now we have to go on the offensive to defend that. We also actually have to be defending the Amazon tax, which Democrats in Washington are already forecasting that they're trying to roll back. So please join us online on Thursday, January 28th at 6 p.m. and invite any of your friends, family, or coworkers who think big business should pay more taxes, not less, right? We've seen Amazon and other pandemic profiteers just make buku bucks during this pandemic. And so the idea that they should be worried about getting double taxed or that they're being taxed too much during this pandemic is absolutely absurd, and we should reject it out of hand. So like I said, I do have a number of additional speakers, and I'm very excited to introduce the next two who are kind of speaking as a pair. Last year in 2020, Seattle City Hall, this was when we could still go to City Hall in person, was absolutely packed with hundreds of Indian American activists. I remember arriving, getting in line, and immediately being offered a picket sign and a slice of pizza. This was a community that was organized for a real fight. And they are the reason that Shama's office was able to pass a resolution against Modi's dangerous, racist CAA NRC laws in India. Little did I know that this mass occupation that was, here in Seattle, mirroring the work in India, would just be a small indication of what was to come. I hope others were able to see it, and I just ran into it by accident on December 26th, that there was a car caravan of dozens of cars, including Mack trucks, in support of the Dali Kalo, I'm probably going to pronounce that wrong, sorry, Dali Kalo movement against Modi's government. Modi has been praised again and again by Donald Trump, which makes sense, right? They've got similar methods of whipping up their right-wing supporters to do their bidding. And this shows, right, that the right wing collaborating internationally demonstrates how important it is that left-wing organizers be collaborating together, but the impact that the NRC legislation that we passed here in Seattle had across inspiring the workers in India into struggle shows that we too on the left can have inspiring struggles that throw people into throwing their hat into the ring when they thought that maybe they were going to stay out of that struggle, right? So it's my honor to introduce two speakers, Khan Hassan with the Indian American Muslim Council, who helped win that anti-CAA NRC resolution, as well as Anil Wagde with the Embakar International Center, who is also part of that fight. And I think Khan Hassan will speak first, and then Anil will speak after. So please go ahead, Khan.
Good morning. Assalamu alaikum. Jai Bhim, Satya Sri Kal, Shalom, and Namaste. Dear friends, my name is Khan Hassan, and I am Indian American Muslim. I speak today in solidarity with Councilmember Sawant, against the recall effort. Councilmember Shama Sawant has been steadfast in her support and allyship of marginalized communities seeking justice against discriminatory practices of both United States and the Indian government. She has denounced the actions of Indian government against the people of Kashmir. She stood with the Palestinian community. She opposed the US government's plan for escalating tensions with Iran. In February last year, she sponsored and led the process for the Seattle City Council to pass a historic resolution condemning the genocidal laws in India, the CAA-NRC. It's actually a Nuremberg law. It's a new version of Nuremberg law, where 200 Indian Muslims will be stateless. These laws have already disenfranchised Muslims, millions of poor people in the Indian state of Assam. Assam is one of the states where they started already implemented this law. And now they have millions people in that state. This law has the ability to disenfranchise millions of people, poor people in India, including Muslims, caste oppressed people like Dalits and Bahujans, women, indigenous people, Adivasis, tribals, members of the LGBTQ community, and more. These laws will unleash ICE, like our immigration in US, ICE like forced detention center. In fact, they are like concentration camp of undocumented people and normalize this process for oppressive regimes all over the world. It was under Shama's vision and leadership that Seattle City Council was the first legislature in the world to condemn this law and censure the Indian government's right-wing agenda to get a secular constitution and establish the rule of upper caste Brahminical supremacy. Following Seattle, many cities in US and counties have passed similar resolution, thus building a formidable resistance movement against the Brahminical agenda of the right-wing fascist RSS BJP under the prime ministership of Modi. Shama's vision and execution at pushing the demand of the working people through tax Amazon movement, it was exemplary. In the time of our society reeling under the effects of runaway capitalistic greed and white supremacy, we need more leaders like Shama in elected position to push for much needed reforms. This recall effort is an attempt at subverting democracy. A democratically elected leader who speaks and works for the people is dangerous in the eyes of the capitalistic and the white ruling class. They realize that the movement for working class people and marginalized Black, Native, Hispanic communities for economic and racial justice is getting stronger and is gaining political victories. The recall effort is trying to clip the wings of the movement, and we cannot let that happen. We offer our unequivocal support and solidarity to Councilmember Shama Sawant. The recall campaign against Shama is an attack on all of us, and we must do everything we can to fight. When we fight, we win. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Khan. And now we have Anil. Go ahead, Anil.
Jai Bhim. We Ambedkarites support Kshama Sawant because she gives the voice to the voiceless. It is important that minority voices are heard in the corridor of power. Ms. Kshama Sawant has done that extremely well. Let it be taxing the rich corporations that do not pay their fair share of taxes. Let it be standing up against another majoritarian nationalist far-right BJP government of India, which passed Citizenship Amendment Act, CAA-NRC, and recently Anti-Farmer Acts to harass the minority, the poor, and the farmers. With the brutal majority, the BJP government is able to run roughshod and pass such laws. When Kshama Sawant passed anti-CAA NRC resolution in Seattle City Council, the first city council to do so in the world over, it gave voice to the minority that was not heard. This anti-CAA NRC resolution has since been passed over a dozen of cities all over the world, taking cue from Seattle City Council. Resolution against anti-farmer laws has also been passed under her leadership. We need the democratic institutions, the constitution, the legal check and balances to ensure voices of the minority are heard within the din of majority. However, the rich and powerful many a times circumvent those checks and balances, and it is important that people like Kshama Sawant raise the issues of the poor, the marginalized, the minority who do not have a voice of their own. Only when the voices of downtrodden are heard in the corridor of power and acted upon, the society progresses. I belong to such a downtrodden, untouchable community from India. Untouchables and women in India had no right for education, no right to education. It was people like Savitribai Phule, Fatima Sheikh, Jyotirao Phule, who started school for women in 1848. Generations of women have benefited from that initiative. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, an eminent scholar from India who studied in Columbia University, was the chief architect of the Indian Constitution. He was opposed by the Congress in India during the election to the Constituent Assembly. He ultimately won an election with the help of Muslim minority, and what a jewel he produced in the form of a socialist, secular Indian constitution. Savitribai Phule, Fatima Sheikh, Jyotirao Phule, and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar are the people who were in the minority but changed the course of a large humanity in India by providing voice to the voiceless. That's the reason we must support Kshama Sawant, who is standing for the rights of the poor, of the minority, and the farmers, and hence we must support Ms. Kshama Sawant. Next resolution be against another draconian law called Love Jihad. Kshama, your work is cut out for you. The establishment feels threatened by the Kshama Sawant since she has given voice to the voiceless minority, and hence this recall campaign. We all must stand in solidarity with Kshama. We must ensure the recall campaign launched by the establishment and the Hindutva forces is defeated in solidarity with Kshama Sawant. Jai Bhim.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker had the courage to run for office as an open socialist in a city known for insider politics, and he won. Please join me in welcoming the alderman for Chicago's 25th Ward and proud DSA member, Byron Sigcho Lopez.
Thank you, Castill, and my apologies for being on the car today. We actually had a really, we have a really rough weekend as our neoliberal mayor in the city of Chicago is continuing to push to reopen schools this week. I just came for a funeral of a 19-year-old graduate of our local high school without pre-existing conditions. And he makes now another painful member of the huge list of people who have died during this pandemic. Over 4,000 people, mainly Black and brown people, who have died in this pandemic because the irresponsibility, the cruelty of billionaires, corporations, and the oligarchs that are governing and have the puppets of both parties, Republicans and Democrats alike. So let be that a reminder. I just would like to thank the clarity, the courage, and integrity that Kshama has shown every single day in office. I think that we have to remember that it's more than words or actions that speak louder than words. And I think that we have seen in Kshama a leader who has inspired many across the country and internationally. As communities have been oppressed and marginalized across the world, but here at home, we have seen the marginalization and oppression to reach despicable levels. And it is important that we talk about international solidarity. And I think there's no one else locally who exemplifies that premise that a good brother here in Chicago, Fred Hampton, used to say, the international proletarian revolution. And I think that Kshama exemplifies those principles and values that we have dearly here in the city of Chicago. When Democrats used to laugh at us saying that there's no way we can have socialists in the city council of Chicago, now we have 5 socialists in the city council of Chicago, and we're going to continue to fight. It is very meaningful to see this number of leaders across the world to talk about the courage and the clarity, the political clarity that we need in times like this to push back against those oligarchs or corporations or billionaires who continue to try to fool our people. I think it's very, very, very clear what we saw this week, and the consolidation of white supremacy and domestic terrorists, and the lack of courage to call that out on both parties. It is very clear that we rely on leaders at the local level and the grassroots movement to bring together labor groups. We bring together people in community-based organizations and leaders with courage, like Kshama, to protect our communities and advance a real working class agenda that will protect us all. I think that is very clear and very fresh in our minds. Kshama's fight and leadership, national leadership, to fight for 15, a campaign that now we have here in the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois. We also have seen the efforts of the Green New Deal, Black Lives Matter solidarity, the fight for police accountability, and the Amazon tax that has inspired us here in Chicago, and is a tax that we're fighting here, no matter how hard the oligarchs and corporations try to fight back, will continue to fight because of the inspiration and courage that we have seen in Seattle. We got to continue to protect those precedents. That important precedent in Seattle is a precedent that oligarchs and corporations are not going to forgive. There's no coincidence. This attack on democracy, and that's attack on a courageous leader, an attack on Kshama is an attack of all of us. In fact, in Chicago, we have seen the many attempts to demonize the socialist movement. They will go after the socialist movement before they go against the white supremacists that we saw this week, coming after the people, the most vulnerable people in our communities. We have seen that they have demonized the left before they condemn white supremacy, before they take action, instead of enabling a white supremacist racist presidency, a sociopath that took the country in the verge of disaster. But we saw little courage from both parties to hold him accountable. That's called hypocrisy. We cannot allow fascism to gain any more ground. And the way to fight fascism is not with a neoliberal, capitalist, greedy corporate agenda, but with socialism, clarity, and integrity in terms like this. That's how we start building and reimagining communities with a different social imaginary, a world that is possible, is within reach. And we are now going to continue to listen to those hypocrites in office, those cowards that don't have the integrity and the courage to even pass a $2,000 stimulus check that was common sense policy. And we still fell. They fell for working people in the most difficult times in recent history. Republicans and Democrats alike, they look at campaigns, important campaigns, to make sure that we fund affordable housing, that we fund Medicare for all, the Green New Deal, that we tax corporations, that we tax those who have the ability to pay, but they don't have that courage. They mock our movement. At the highest level of the Democratic Party, they still talk about defunding the police as a slogan. When we see on the ground the police brutality, here in the city of Chicago, we saw the shameful act of a mayor who tried to cover up, after Rahm Emanuel tried to cover up a police brutality case. We saw now a mayor here in the city of Chicago, again, doing the same thing that people in Chicago condemn. That is the kind of Democrats that we have running our cities. And that's what is important, that we also call that out, because that's the way we fight fascism. That's the way that we fight and build a different social imaginary, with courage, with clarity, and a clear pathway for a different society, a different world that we all know is within reach. I think it's important that we protect Kshama, because we know that the elites are not going to allow to have leaders like Kshama, because they're going to make up a movement, a ripple effect across the country they're starting to see. That's why the attack on Kshama is important for the elites, because they want to send a message to all of us that we have to be afraid, that we have to be in fear. And that's the same fear that we have seen in our communities. Communities of color that are being afraid of ICE, they have been afraid of the pandemic, and they're afraid of greed and corporations that don't pay the first share, and they continue to push the burden in the most vulnerable. That is what is at stake, brothers and sisters. We're fighting here in Chicago to have community control of the police and full accountability of the public. That's a message that resonated in Seattle, and we are taking it here in our own city. We're fighting to make sure that corporations and billionaires, bankers and developers pay their taxes and not and don't pay us with philanthropic charity, philanthropic crumbs when people are suffering. We demand that they put back those dollars, those resources that they extract from our communities back in our neighborhoods, in Black and brown neighborhoods that are suffering. They extract our wealth for profit in the time of a pandemic. We gotta keep building and fighting at the grassroots level. Here in our own backyard, in the highest level, in one of the highest, in one of the most shameful acts of most recent acts of this administration, Mayor Lightfoot, reopening schools. When we have seen a mutation of the virus taking the toll on more lives, when we see the numbers is skyrocketing, but we see the business interest groups pushing their own agenda and pushing to have our kids, Black and brown kids, back in the classroom and putting more lives at risk. We have seen the attempts in our own backyard to continue to displace residents. Even they have the shameful audacity to try to push for a landmark in a gentrifying neighborhood. They tried to put a landmark of 1,000 buildings, trying to displace 1,000 homeowners in a low-income resident, in a low-income community, trying to displace people in the middle of a pandemic. Those are the kind of Democrats that we have. So of course we have a Republican Party who is a fascist party, who is full of racists, who hold Shoko accountable. But we need to make sure that we have now. Now is the time that we have leaders like Kshama. That's why local politics are so important, because we can make a difference locally and be an example from the other communities who are fighting with resiliency and fighting with courage. We need to unite. This is the time for the working class. Let me just finish with this because it's about international solidarity, and we need to learn from what happened in other parts of the world. In Bolivia, we have saw how the elites of the country, the elites corporations, international corporations, were proud to take and openly said that they were participated in a coup to take down a democratically elected presidency of the first indigenous president, Evo Morales, in Bolivia. But we got to learn from that what organizing was able to do. And that's what Kshama sets an example. And it's absolutely right that when we organize, we win. And it's extremely important that we learn the lesson. The continent where we see international influence taking down governments, oppressing people, extracting wealth. The same policy we see here that happened across the world, but it fills me with optimism to see what happened in Bolivia, where the indigenous communities with labor groups, some of them who paid with their own lives, were back in government. They took back government away from the elites, from the US intervention, and it back to the working class communities and indigenous communities who courageously fought back to bring back democratically, but with courage, back their government to the working class people of the people of Bolivia. It is very important that we continue to organize in every corner of this country and across the world for international solidarity. That's what I'm proud to stand up and stand in solidarity with Kshama, because we have seen the kind of courageous leader that she is. Someone who is not afraid of speaking the truth, someone who is not afraid of taking stances, someone who stood up for Black Lives Matter, even though they're trying to take it, even though they have come after her for doing what's right. And that's why we got to stand up with her. This moment of history is a call for all of us to take action, to be in solidarity with one another and protect Kshama. Protecting Kshama is protecting taxing, is an attempt for us to make sure that we protect each other in solidarity and make sure that billionaires, corporations, developers, and bankers pay the first share. That's what's going to turn things around. And that's what we need to make sure that we work together in solidarity for a different world, a different society, a different social imaginary that, as Kshama said, is not going to come from the political establishment. It's not going to come from Republicans and Democrats alike. We're already seeing they're starting to cut deals with one another. Now is the time we organize. We organize for what we said with my brother, Fred Hampton, for the international proletarian revolution. This is the time for us to take bold action. And this is bold action. Thank you, Kshama. We're here with you. We are here for each other. Solidarity forever. Hasta la victoria siempre.
Thank you so much, Byron. I could feel that fire. Hasta la victoria siempre, for sure. I think it's no accident that we have so many fired up socialists speaking today. I think we had Justin, we had Shama, we had Matt, myself as well. and we've got one more or a couple more socialists to speak for you today. But I want to comment actually, if you've thought about, if you've been involved in whether it's the tax Amazon fight or the fight for the resolution against Modi, and you've thought to yourself, maybe I could be a socialist. I have only heard maybe attacks on socialist ideas in the corporate media. I didn't really learn about socialism when I was in school, but if all of these people that I'm inspired by are socialists, I might also be. I would appeal for you to think about getting involved with Socialist Alternative. Hopefully right now in the chat, people are dropping links for you to apply to join Socialist Alternative. If you think, I'm not sure if I'm ready to join yet, but I definitely think that these people might be onto something, I would appeal for you to subscribe to our publications. I think we've seen relentlessly this week really an exposure of the corporate media. I mean, it feels like it's been ongoing through the whole course of Trump's presidency. But that even NPR, who's supposedly a public media broadcast corporation, as right-wingers were flooding the Capitol building, what were they having people on to interview to say? They said, oh, well, I think a Green New Deal position is it's too far. We're not ready for it. We need more moderate positions. And we do not need more media outlets that tell us to lower our hopes and expect less, right? So I would appeal, if you've been excited by the things that you've heard today, if you want to stay plugged into working class media outlets, that you could subscribe to the Socialist Alternative newspaper or our journal or both. Because those are the ways that you stay plugged into all these various struggles that we see that the corporate media doesn't cover. I know that I've had to really dig to search for coverage of the farmers in India that have been standing up. We want to be able to cover the teachers in Chicago that chose not to show up when the Mayor Lightfoot tried to send them back to school. And these are not articles that mass media is interested in covering, but that a working class media outlet does. So yeah, all that to say that socialism is on the rise, and socialist candidates are also on the rise. And it's my honor to introduce another of those socialist candidates, and this one from the East Coast. And that's Mike Connolly, who's a Massachusetts state representative as well as a DSA member, who I'm really excited to introduce. Please go ahead, Mike.
Well, thank you so much, Emily. And it's truly an honor to be here in solidarity with you and with Shama Sawant and with Socialist Alternative in Seattle. My name is Mike Connolly. I was just sworn into my third term as a state rep for parts of Cambridge and Somerville, Massachusetts. I'm also a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, and I've collaborated on numerous occasions with Socialist Alternative Boston, right here in Boston. And, I really want to say, I think from my standpoint, it's hard to think of another elected official on the city or state level anywhere in the United States of America who has had a bigger impact than Shama Sawant over the past decade. And that's really why, it was so important for me to be here and to just add my voice to this conversation, that we have to reject this bogus recall campaign. We have to defend Shama. And the reason why is the example that she sets. And she's set an example for me personally. And I know she sets an example for people all over the country and all over the world. And, when I first got involved in political organizing, and I think it's like Shama, it was born out of the Occupy movement, and I started to look at the political system. There were hardly any examples that I could see that really showed the kind of politics that spoke to the working class, that spoke to the kind of politics of creating a socialist alternative to the neoliberal corporate wing of the Democratic Party. And I wasn't so sure, if I should run for office or if I could be successful. And it was really seeing the $15 minimum wage movement in Seattle and seeing Shama's role in that and seeing the impact of Socialist Alternative that really gave me the courage that, yes, I could run on a platform of lifting the ban on rent control, that I could, openly support raising taxes and to bring these issues into the political process in our community. And I just stand in awe of what you've accomplished. You know, the Fight for 15, the 15 Now campaign started in Seattle. It has spread to Massachusetts. It's spread all over the country. But we know that for all these reasons and more, people like Jeff Bezos and his billionaires and the corporate politicians who always seem to be ready to push Shama out of office, they're back again this year. And that's why, once again, we have to come together and we have to defeat them, not only so that you can continue building the momentum that you have in Seattle, but we can send a message all around the country when working class socialist politicians work in partnership with movements, that that's going to be successful and we're going to build on that success. I'm coming to you from my apartment, which is just down the street from Kendall Square, where, you know, we have some of the largest corporations in the world: Google, Amazon, Facebook, many pharmaceutical companies and real estate developers. And so I'm really struck by how the issues that Shama and Socialist Alternative are taking on in Seattle are the very same issues that we're fighting for here in Cambridge and Somerville. And I also want to give particular shout out to our Cambridge-based Google workers who have joined with workers in Seattle to launch that union of the alphabet workers. It's so exciting to see that, and it's amazing to think of where that sort of organizing can go. I also really want to highlight how important this Tax Amazon movement is. You know, in the affordable housing discussion here in Massachusetts on Beacon Hill, where our state legislature is, this idea that we could go raise significant chunks of new revenue from the wealthy and from large corporations, this is an idea that hasn't even been in the conversation. And I can honestly tell you, after seeing this in the initial success of the Tax Amazon effort, I went right ahead and, you know, basically took that idea and worked to craft my own legislation, a housing for all proposal based on a corporate excise tax that targets large corporations to end homelessness here in Massachusetts. And again, you know, I can't say how incredible it is that we can look to Shama for these examples of how we can take these ideas and fight to make them a reality in communities all over the United States. You know, another thing that I stand in awe of is the efforts that Shama has led to ban chemical weapons in Seattle. You know, that's so important. It's so encouraging. I actually put a tear gas ban to a vote in our state legislature over the summer. That vote failed, 38 in support, 121 opposed. And our state legislature is vast supermajority controlled by Democrats. And, you know, I think we need to have elected officials who are willing to speak truth to power and speak truth to the police. You know, I was at a Black Lives Matter demonstration where Boston cops actually drove their police cruisers at high speeds through a crowd, into a crowd of peaceful demonstrators. And I spoke out about that, and literally within the next day was condemned by the leader of the Boston Police Union. And these are the kinds of things where if we don't have elected officials like Shama who are willing to speak that truth to power, who are willing to hold the powerful accountable, then no one else is going to do it. And so that's why, you know, I am so committed and so excited to see us win this, you know, defeat this recall campaign and then build on it. You know, change doesn't happen linearly, right? And we are in a moment where if we can get through this fascist takeover of the White House, if we can get through this terrible pandemic, we know that all over this country, people are looking for answers. They're looking for an alternative to neoliberal corporate politics. And with the work that is happening on this call and the work that Shama is doing, that example is being set. And so I'm very hopeful that starting with the defeat of this recall campaign and then continuing with the work that we're doing, we really can transform our politics and transform our society in the coming years. And so I know it's been a long call, so I'll leave it at that, but I just want to say how grateful and how inspired I am by the work that's happening in Seattle. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mike. It definitely feels good to not feel like we're just alone here out on the left coast, but that this is a national and international movement of socialist solidarity. Before I introduce our next speaker, I do want to make one more plug. Maybe you showed up late. Maybe you just thought, oh, all these people know who I am. I don't need to fill out this sign-in sheet. But I really want to appeal that you fill out the sign-in sheet because we want to be able to let you know what's happening in this fast developing situation. So hopefully folks are dropping the link in the chat. And if you haven't filled it out yet, that you'll fill it out now. Because, you know, it seems like a really simple act, but, you know, when fast moving situations happen, like we saw in 2019, when we saw a multi-million-dollar money bomb from corporations that totally changed the terrain of the election, we want to talk to our supporters about that. So I hope that you will fill out the sign-in sheet so we can stay in touch with you. Our next speaker, you've already heard a little bit from her, so I know that you're going to be excited to hear from her. Castill Hightower is the sister of Herbert Hightower Jr. He was murdered by the Seattle Police Department in 2004. Since then, Castill has led the fight to demand accountability and transparency, including supporting the demand for an elected civilian oversight board. So go ahead, Castill.
Thank you, Emily. As you all know, I'm Castill Hightower. And today I stand in solidarity with Shama Sawant, the Black Lives Matter movement, our houseless neighbors, union members, impacted families, and any and everyone who is living under this unjust capitalist system that seeks to disenfranchise and repress any fighters who dare speak out and fight against the injustices and blatant inequities we live through every single day. In 2004, my family experienced one of its greatest losses ever felt. A direct consequence and casualty that is the lack of accountability and oversight of Seattle police and so many police forces throughout this country. My brother, Herbert Hightower Jr., was murdered by SPD while experiencing a mental health crisis and snatched from us before we could get him the help he deserved. It's taken 16 years for my family to even get access to the records of my brother's killing, and we only got them now thanks to the help of Shama and her office helping us organize a public petition demanding that Seattle police immediately release the records. It is clear to me how the majority of ordinary people want real police accountability. Our petition got over 500 signatures in just 24 hours, and I've since gotten over 2,900 signatures in total. Shama's office spearheaded a letter that was then signed by all 9 Seattle City Council members because of the strength of our petition and the public spotlight on the issue. Shama is a movement leader with a 100% consistent record of standing against police abuse, who has led winning struggles for the first in the nation reforms, like the chemical weapons ban during the George Floyd uprising, and expanding funding for restorative justice. Last year, she was the one council member who kept her promise and put forward legislation to defund the bloated police budget to fund Black and Brown community needs, as well as mental health services. Services that could have saved my brother's life. Shama was the only one who didn't break her promises to the Black Lives Matter movement. Yet, Shama has been singled out for punishment by the political establishment. Not Breonna Taylor's killers, not Jacob Blake's killers, and not my brother's killer, Steve Herjak, who kept getting promoted and is now an assistant chief of the Seattle Police Department. He got promoted for my brother's murder instead of punished for it. This is the same double standard that allows armed white supremacists and homegrown terrorists to seize the US Capitol, at least 2 of which we now know were SPD officers themselves, and who were left overwhelmingly unchallenged by DC police while my brother was shot in the chest for holding kitchen butter knives during a vulnerable mental health moment, while peaceful protesters fighting racism face chemical weapons from Democratic mayor-led police departments across the country. A shameful and reprehensible contrast and indictment of the system we live in. But together, we say enough is enough. Enough of these litigious lawsuits by police officers who refuse to hold themselves accountable for their egregious and murderous actions and are instead rewarded for it. And enough corporate-backed smear campaigns against our movement's most effective leaders. We need fighters like Shama, who has been democratically elected by the people of Seattle over and over again, to remain in her position, because we know when she fights, it's not for the corporate interest groups, the billionaire class, or the corrupt police departments who kill us with impunity. It's not because she is there for her own career or to make nice with the establishment. We know that when she fights, we fight and we win. The time is now to rise up together and fight against a recall for one of our most steadfast, determined, and effective leaders of our time. Thank you.
Whew, Castill, that was really inspiring as well as infuriating. But it's, yeah, I think it's important to say that we have one, right? One small step, which is the release of those records. And, you know, that's a victory that we can continue to build on. So as we are moving to close up this rally, and I appreciate everyone who stayed on this really inspiring, but also long, because we have such a big, broad, diverse community that is standing behind Shama event. One thing that you probably are asking yourself is, you know, you saw probably on the flyer that Julia Salazar, the New York Senator and DSA member, had agreed to speak and was supposed to be here today. Unfortunately, at the last minute, her office had a number of things piled on them, including an early start to the New York Senate session, and as well as a walkthrough of a community hospital while they're experiencing a COVID surge, and she just wasn't able to make it. So we do apologize for that, but we hope to be able to release a video from Senator Salazar in the coming days with her statements. You know, because it is important, right, that socialists at every turn are attacked, that you know, all they do is make speeches and they don't legislate, and we know that that's absolutely false. And in fact, they're the most accountable. You know, I think Byron sharing that he was at a funeral earlier today really speaks to the deep connection that socialist electeds have to their constituents, to the working class people that they represent. So yeah, we really appreciate Senator Salazar's solidarity, and we look forward to being able to share that statement more fully. I want to deeply thank from the bottom of my heart everyone who has spoken today. I know I've been just incredibly moved by the breadth and depth of the solidarity, how international it was, that we have you know, Somali immigrants, that we have Indian American immigrants, that we had you know, voices from Chicago and Massachusetts and all over, and of course, many, many voices from here in Seattle. And this is what it's going to take for us to win. And I also include in those voices that spoke and stood with Shama today, the 200 individual donors who put their money where their mouth is for this campaign. And there are many, many things ahead of us, right? Today is kind of the shot out of the cannon of the first day where we're getting really active and moving into struggle on a national scale. I definitely encourage, I think it was Justin who said earlier, for you to talk to your neighbors, for you to talk to your coworkers, for you to talk to your friends about, you know, Shama Sawant and what her office has been able to accomplish, because it's going to take a broad coalition of working class people to hold on to this seat. And you know, that you fill in the sign-in sheet, that you sign up to volunteer, right? There are lots of ways to be involved. We need all kinds of support. One of the things that you can also do is email our campaign with your personal endorsement. And you don't have to be an elected official to offer your endorsement, right? If you look at the endorsement page on our website, you can see that there are hundreds of rank and file union members and just ordinary people in their communities, because those are the kind of people that stand with Shama Sawant, right? Not CEOs or big business executives, but average working class people. And those are the people we want endorsements from. So there are all kinds of ways to support, and I appreciate all of you for being here today. I want to reiterate, just as kind of as a closing point, you know, that there are key upcoming dates and events. So we do phone banking every Sunday as the campaign, so that we can reach out to people and tell them, you know, what's going on, what are the updates, especially as we're waiting on the Supreme Court ruling. We will have a big phone banking event on the 17th. Where we'll get together our volunteers and supporters and I'll be phone banking, so make sure that you RSVP to that on our website or on our Facebook account, which you're now all, of course, all following. And then I also want to double down on encouraging folks to attend the Tax Amazon Action Conference. Either you are involved in helping win and keep that, in helping win that tax and you would like to keep it, or like Byron said, like Mike said, you're from somewhere that could use an Amazon tax, that needs to actually find revenue to plug the holes in the budget, to make sure that we can expand healthcare services, and that we're not seeing these really brutal and repugnant things of cutting housing budgets, cutting public transit, or cutting healthcare budgets during a global pandemic, right? And so please come to the Tax Amazon Action Conference on January 28th, so that you can find out more about how we can not just defend this victory, but extend it, right? And I believe that, those are sort of the last housekeeping issues. Thank you so much to everyone who was able to make it out. Struggle in solidarity, and stay tuned for more activity from the Shama Solidarity campaign.
to a savage land started in flames. Where competition's at the heart of the game. What a shame, spend so much time caught up in pain. You go insane and run from love when you ought to remain. It's hard to change, kinda sinister. How the smart ones become cynics first. Strong work ethic without the inner work. Pretend the hurt is gone. To stop weeping like willows. Start off soft as pillows and up hard as armadillos. To no feelings, no thoughts, nothing could break through. Working like robots, just like you're made to. That's the whole plot. Cast off the shackles, unpack the past, and the battle unravels. Feel it all. Let the pain overwhelm you. It's crazy like Bellevue, but it got something to tell you. When you hear that secret, it's the key to the lock. Till then, you think you're free, but you're not.
Cause after the crack, still the love grows stronger. Love is a battlefield where hearts get broken. Used to be the man of steel, then I cracked open. I feel what I have to feel, deal with the trauma. Cause after the crack, still the love grows stronger.
Negativity got that black hole gravity. Creeping to your soul like cavities, drain your batteries. Pain and tragedy, leave the world painted badly. Can't see the beauty no more? Change your strategy. To kill the static, just ditch the bad habits. Add gratitude to the mix, it's mathematics. Reprogram to change the default mode. No time to evolve slow. Learn to see thoughts grow, they sure to rise up. Use the past as fertilizer. All of those cracks make a person wiser. You're learning to live. A certain type of curse is a gift. If you unpack it right, it reverses and shifts. Just a diamond in the rough that needs polish. Eat from the tree of knowledge. See deep and be astonished. But most ignore, close the door and won't explore the dark vaults where the gold is stored.
Yeah.